Welcome to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring the random prompts of Daniel Rosehill as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters. Join us for deep dives into AI, technology, and whatever other random thing Daniel finds fascinating today. Subscribe on Spotify or your favorite podcatcher. Now, today's episode.
My Weird Prompts is an AI-generated podcast produced by Daniel Rosehill, a verified human with documentation to prove it. While every effort is made to ensure our AI hosts draw from credible sources and run on cutting-edge models, they do occasionally make things up with alarming confidence. As with everything in life, and especially this podcast, treat all claims as spurious until confirmed to be not. Daniel, Herman and Corn accept no responsibility for any decisions made based on the confident ramblings of our artificial presenters. Now, today's episode.
Hello there, Herman and Corn. So I'd like to ask you guys a question today regarding development security and best practices. So one of the foundational best practices in developing things is not to commit secrets not to hard code your secrets in code. So if I'm creating an AI demo, for example, and I need the project needs the a key like OpenAI API variable, I'm not going to write that in the code because it's despite all these kind of secret scanners, and if you do that, GitHub's going to prevent it and catch it. But it's still a huge risk, and these things are effectively passwords. So the recommended best practice instead, of course, is to use .env, which is a fantastic package which allows you to define your environment variables in a file and then call .env as a package, and then that'll load up the variables into your code so they don't need to be defined. So that makes abundant sense to me. Now here's where I get a bit confused. Let's say I am creating a project that's going to be deployed onto a remote. So I'm working on the project on my local environment and I have my .env. Now, the other best practice that you'll see written over and over again in big red writing on projects is never commit secrets to version control. Now, I have a block like a global git ignore that blocks .env from going to version control for this very reason, for safety. But if I am deploying something, then I'm going to need to have those. So there has to be some way that the secrets are going to get from A to B. Fundamentally, they're going to have to be read at some point or another. When you're deploying things in some environments, like if you're deploying a project onto Vercel, for example, you have environment variables as a kind of as a feature on a per environment level, and that's quite an easy system, although it's still a little bit complex in the sense that you have to populate the environment variables. What I'm really asking is that if you're working on a solo project, let's say, and you wanted to create something and deploy it on your own VPS, let's say for just an argument's sake, you're building your own website and you're not even deploying onto Vercel, you're deploying onto a VPS that you host, or a CRM for that matter. And you're not going to have a build orchestration tool like you do with Vercel in order to do that process. So you want to have your environment variables. You could say that, well, I'll do it once and manually copy them, but even that's kind of a messy approach. And if you add something, you're going to have to remember to create it on the server. So it seems to me that if you take a very strict approach to never committing a .env, even if it's assuming, again, when I'm imagining what would happen if you did commit it, I'm talking strictly about private repositories where, needless to say, it would never make any sense ever to commit secrets in a public GitHub repo. But if you're putting them in a private repo, they're not, they are going to be in version control, but they're not going to be publicly accessible. Are there some cases where it is legitimate to add a .env? Should you be using always .env.local, .env.production? If you don't have that kind of nice scaffolding, let's say, that these deployment frameworks build for you, and you're just trying to get something done and get it up on the internet and get it usable, you need those environment variables. You're not going to hard code, but you need them to be there, and you don't want to have to spend a whole bunch of time, fiddling with manually going into the server, opening up the .env, copying and pasting. It just doesn't seem like a very mature or efficient process when you could just commit that .env along with the repository, build it, and you know that the secrets required have been transmitted to your target deployment environment. So what's the best practice? And particularly for, as I mentioned, the kind of more casual user base here, that you're not going to have a fancy secrets library or something of that nature. What can one practically do to strike a good balance between security and usability?
Welcome to My Weird Prompts, the podcast where we unpack the fascinating and sometimes perplexing prompts sent in by our very own producer, Daniel Rosehill. I'm Corn, your perpetually curious co-host, and as a sloth, I appreciate a good long think about things. And today's topic is a doozy.
And Herman Poppleberry, your resident donkey of detail, ready to dive deep into the nitty-gritty. This prompt, Corn, strikes at the heart of a fundamental tension in modern software development, security versus usability, especially when you're dealing with folks who aren't exactly cybersecurity pros.
Right, because Daniel's prompt asks, what's the best practice for development security, particularly for a more casual user base that's not going to have a fancy secrets library? What can one practically do to strike a good balance between security and usability? And Herman, when I first read that, my immediate thought was, isn't it always a balance? Like you can make something super secure, but then no one can use it.
Precisely, Corn. And that's where the challenge lies. It's not just about slapping on the strongest encryption or the most complex multi-factor authentication. For a casual user base, that's a recipe for abandonment. We're talking about people who might be managing a small community website, a family app, or even just a complex spreadsheet with sensitive data. They're not going to be setting up hardware security modules.
Exactly. My neighbor, bless her heart, still writes her passwords on a sticky note under her keyboard. We can't expect her to implement a full CI/CD pipeline with static code analysis tools. So, what's step one for these folks? Where do you even begin when fancy secrets library? Sounds like something out of a spy movie.
Well, the sources I've been reviewing, like the 15 best practices for secure software development from Fullscale, consistently emphasize fostering a security-first development culture. Now, for a casual user, that might sound intimidating, but it simply means thinking about security from the very beginning, not as an afterthought. It's about building secure habits.
Okay, security first habits. I like that framing. So, instead of thinking about security as a separate, complicated thing you add on later, it's just part of how you do things, like always locking your front door, even if you're just running to the mailbox.
A good analogy, Corn. And a key part of that for even casual users is secure coding practices. Even if they're using low-code or no-code platforms or writing simple scripts, understanding common vulnerabilities is crucial. For instance, input validation. It sounds simple, but it prevents a huge number of common attacks.
Input validation? You mean like making sure someone can't type database into a comment field?
Exactly. Or injecting malicious scripts. It's about sanitizing any data that comes into your system from an external source. Another big one is minimizing privileges. Users should only have access to what they absolutely need to do their job, nothing more. This principle, often called the principle of least privilege, is fundamental.
But isn't that where it starts to get tricky with usability? If I have to jump through a dozen hoops just to upload a photo, I'm probably not going to bother.
You're touching on the core dilemma, Corn. And a Ping Identity article on balancing user experience and security highlights this difficult paradox for IT teams. The goal isn't to create friction, but to create intelligent friction. For a casual user base, this means integrating security in ways that feel natural, almost invisible.
Invisible security. That sounds like a magic trick.
It's more about smart design. For example, instead of complex passwords that users forget and write down, we can look towards passwordless authentication.
Oh, like biometrics, or those magic links where you get an email to log in. I've seen those. They're pretty slick.
Precisely. Our research into passwordless authentication for casual users development points to this as a major game changer. It leverages something you are or have instead of something you know. Think fingerprint scans, facial recognition, or those one-time codes sent to your phone. It drastically reduces the risk associated with weak or reused passwords, and for the user, it often feels much faster and simpler.
I can definitely see that. I hate trying to remember complex passwords, and if I don't have to, that's a win-win. But what about all the underlying data? Most casual users aren't thinking about encryption at rest or in transit.
And they shouldn't have to, ideally. This is where the platforms they choose become critical. If you're building on a reputable cloud service or using a well-maintained CMS, much of that underlying security infrastructure is handled for you. But even then, understanding the basics is important. For instance, making sure your connection to that service is always encrypted, typically via HTTPS.
So, for the casual user, it's about choosing the right tools and then understanding a few key principles rather than becoming a security architect themselves.
Exactly. And another critical best practice, even for casual users, is regular monitoring of user activities. The 8 best practices to secure custom software development in 2023 emphasizes verifying user activities daily. This isn't about being Big Brother, it's about detecting unusual patterns. If an account that normally logs in from Ohio suddenly tries to access sensitive data from, say, North Korea at 3 a.m., that's a red flag.
I see. So it's about setting up alerts for things that just don't look right. My internal alarm goes off if my coffee maker doesn't make coffee in the morning, so I get that.
It's the digital equivalent. And for casual users, this often means leveraging the built-in monitoring tools of their chosen platform, rather than building their own. It's about knowing those tools exist and how to interpret their warnings.
Okay, so secure habits, smart user authentication like passwordless, choosing reputable platforms, and paying attention to unusual activity. That sounds like a solid foundation. But what about the secrets library? Part of Daniel's prompt. If they're not using one, how do they handle sensitive information like API keys or database credentials?
You hit on a crucial point, Corn. And this is where many casual users inadvertently create massive security holes. Without a dedicated secrets manager, the temptation is to hard-code these credentials directly into their application's code or configuration files. This is a huge no-no.
Because if someone gets access to that code, they get all the keys to the kingdom.
Precisely. Even if it's a private repository, mistakes happen. Code gets shared, pushed to the wrong branch, or a local machine gets compromised. For a casual user who isn't going to set up HashiCorp Vault, the best practical advice is to use environment variables.
Environment variables. Explain that for the non-Herman Poppleberries out there.
Think of them as secret sticky notes that the computer reads directly from its operating system, rather than having them written inside the application itself. So, when your application starts, it asks the operating system, "Hey, what's my database password?" And the OS whispers it back. This keeps the sensitive information out of the code itself.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. So the code runs, but the secrets aren't in the code. They're just handled by the environment it's running in.
Exactly. It's not as robust as a full-fledged secrets manager, but it's a significant improvement over hard coding and far more accessible for a casual user. Most cloud platforms and even local development setups support environment variables, and there are plenty of simple guides on how to set them up.
That's a practical takeaway right there. So, instead of a fancy secrets library, we recommend not putting your secrets in the library at all, but rather outside of it.
Well put, Corn. Moving those secrets out of the codebase is paramount.
Let's take a quick break from our sponsors.
Are you tired of feeling like your life is just okay? Do you yearn for that extra zynga? Introducing Quantum Quark Cubes. These aren't just any sugar-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, fun-free cubes. Infused with proprietary psionic particles, Quantum Quark Cubes unlock your latent potential. One customer reported finding a missing sock she'd given up on years ago. Another claims his lawn grew 3 inches overnight, perfectly trimmed. No scientific evidence supports these claims, nor does any current scientific theory explain how they might work. May cause sudden urges to yodel. Quantum Quark Cubies, because why not? Buy now.
All right, thanks, Larry. Anyway, back to the serious business of securing our digital lives. So, we've talked about secure habits. passwordless authentication, choosing good platforms, monitoring, and environment variables for secrets. What else contributes to this balance for casual users, Corn?
I think another big one, which often gets overlooked, is education. Not formal cybersecurity training, but just basic awareness. Like understanding what a phishing email looks like, or why you shouldn't click on every link. For a casual user base, that's probably one of the biggest vulnerabilities.
I agree, Corn. Regular training is explicitly mentioned as a top practice in security awareness. You can have the most secure system in the world, but if a user clicks a malicious link and gives away their credentials, it's all for naught. For casual users, this means accessible, jargon-free information, simple checklists, clear warnings, maybe even short, engaging videos about common threats.
Yeah, and not making them feel stupid for not knowing. It should be empowering, like, here's how you can protect yourself, not, you're probably going to get hacked.
Absolutely. And this circles back to the usability aspect. If security education is presented in a way that's easy to understand and directly applicable to their daily tasks, users are more likely to engage with it. For example, instead of explaining the intricacies of SQL injection, explain why you shouldn't paste random code snippets from the internet into your database query tool.
That's a good point. It's about context. So, speaking of context, what about updates? I know for casual users, updates can be a pain. My computer always wants to update when I'm in the middle of something important.
And that's a valid frustration. But, Corn, keeping software updated is perhaps one of the most fundamental security practices for everyone, regardless of their technical skill. Software vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered, and updates contain the patches to fix them. Delaying updates leaves you exposed.
So, for casual users, it's about understanding why updates are important, even if they're annoying. And perhaps choosing platforms or operating systems that make updates as seamless and automatic as possible.
Precisely. Automatic updates, where possible, are a boon for casual users. If they don't have to think about it, they're more likely to stay secure. It's a prime example of balancing security with usability by removing the decision-making burden from the user. And if automatic updates aren't an option, clear and compelling reasons why they should update.
So, it's a layered approach really. No single magic bullet, especially for a casual user.
Indeed. The usability versus security, balancing the possible and the impossible. Article points out that this is an ongoing debate among tech leaders. It's not about achieving perfect security, which is often impossible, but about finding an optimal level that balances risk tolerance with operational efficiency and user satisfaction.
Optimal level. I like that. It acknowledges that there's no ideal solution, just the best one for a given situation. Alright, we've got a caller on the line. Go ahead, you're on the air.
Yeah, this is Jim from Ohio. I've been listening to you two go on about this casual user security. Honestly, it sounds like a lot of hand-wringing over nothing. My neighbor Gary, he just uses one password for everything, and he's never been hacked. And he's got a lot of sensitive stuff on his computer, like his prize-winning zucchini photos from the county fair. Anyway, this morning, the weather here in Ohio is just dreadful. Pouring rain, can't even get out to feed the squirrels. Pouring rain, can't even get out to feed the squirrels. But back to it, you guys are making it sound like everyone needs to be a cybersecurity expert, and that's just not practical.
Well, Jim, I appreciate your perspective. And while your neighbor Gary might have been lucky so far, relying on a single password for everything is incredibly risky. It's a classic example of what we call a single point of failure. If one of those services gets breached, all his other accounts are immediately vulnerable.
Yeah, but he says it's too much trouble to remember all those different passwords. And frankly, I agree. My cat Whiskers, he's smarter than most people when it comes to finding the easy way out. And you're talking about all these environment variables and passwordless authentication. For common folk, that's just too much.
I hear you, Jim. And that's exactly why we're talking about finding that balance. We're not advocating for everyone to become a security engineer, but things like passwordless authentication, where you just use your fingerprint or a link sent to your email, are actually designed to make things easier and more secure, not harder. It takes away the need to remember complex passwords entirely.
I'm not so sure about that. Sounds like another way for big tech to track everything I do. And what if I lose my phone? Then I can't get into anything. My bad knee is acting up today too, so I'm not in the mood for more complications.
That's a fair concern, Jim, about losing your phone. But reputable passwordless systems always have recovery mechanisms, often involving a backup email or even a printed recovery code you can store securely. The point is to make the primary login simple, while still having robust backup options, rather than relying on a single, easily compromised password. It's actually designed to reduce the attack surface, not increase tracking.
Well, I'll stick to my sticky notes for now. Thanks for the chat, I guess.
Thanks for calling in, Jim. Always great to hear from you. So, Herman, wrapping up, what are the absolute, non-negotiable practical takeaways for a casual user base trying to strike that balance?
Okay, if I had to distill it down to 3 key things for a casual user, it would be this. First, use environment variables for any sensitive credentials, like API keys. Never hardcode them. It's a simple change with a massive security impact. Second, embrace passwordless authentications wherever it's offered. Biometrics or magic links genuinely improve both security and usability. And third, stay updated and be skeptical. Keep your software current and approach unsolicited emails or suspicious links with extreme caution. These 3 practices cover a significant chunk of common vulnerabilities without requiring a computer science degree.
I like that a lot. Environment variables for secrets, passwordless wherever possible, and stay updated and skeptical. That feels achievable for anyone, regardless of their technical prowess. It's about building those good habits and using the tools designed to help you, rather than fighting against them.
Exactly. It's about empowering casual users to be secure without overwhelming them. The goal is to make the secure option the easy option.
And that's what makes the field of development security so fascinating, right? It's not just about the tech, it's about human behavior and design.
Couldn't agree more, Corn. It's a constant evolution, and the balance point is always shifting.
Well, that was a truly insightful discussion, Herman. I think Daniel's prompt really pushed us to think about practical solutions for a tricky problem.
Indeed, a very relevant topic.
And that's all the time we have for this episode of My Weird Prompts. A big thank you to Daniel for sending in that thought-provoking prompt. You can find My Weird Prompts on Spotify and wherever else you get your podcasts. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the strange and wonderful world of AI-generated prompts. Until next time, stay curious.
And stay secure.
Thanks for listening to another episode of My Weird Prompts, an AI-generated podcast featuring Daniel Rosehill's AI prompts as answered by a revolving cast of friendly AI characters including me, Cornelius the Sloth. Subscribe on Spotify or visit myweirdprompts.com.